Am I live? I do think I'm live. Am I live? Yes. Great. Let me go live on Instagram. Great. Didn't look like I was live at first, but I am. So I'm so glad. So I'm letting people know on Twitter that I'm here because I always like to let my peeps know when I'm live. Uh-oh. Hold on. Let me camera stuff. I tell you. It's a mess. Why is the camera always a mess? Here's why. I don't know. I don't know why camera stuff is always a mess. Okay. All right. So we're live. And as promised last week. So last week I was talking to some tweeps who were leaving me some comments on last week's show. And they said it would be a good topic to talk about who's the most relatable superhero. And I know a lot of people think that they know who that is. And a lot of people think certain things, but I might surprise you with what I think. And I might surprise you with uh, my conclusion and my reasoning. But that's what we're going to talk about today. I'm trying to give people a few more minutes to come on. But that's what we're going to talk about today is who is the most relatable superhero? Who is the most relatable superhero? Like I said, I think I kind of already know what popular opinion is. And then I asked some other people to weigh in on it. So that's going to be interesting to see what everybody has to say when it's all said and done. Because, like I said, I am almost 100% sure that my take on it, that my conclusion is not going to be what people think. And that's cool. That's cool. Everybody's got a right to their own opinions, of course. So I'm trying to give people a moment to come on. So we can talk about this topic. But anyway, so the question is, who's the most relatable superhero? Okay, Al Rock is here. I see you, Al Rock. Good to see you. I'm sorry, Air Rock. I said Al Rock. I'm sorry. That looked like an L to me. That's an I. Sorry. So I'm trying to pull up something that I'm going to play for you. So that's what I'm doing. So I'm not going to play that right away, but we're going to get to it in a minute because it's super important that I hear from you. Okay. So as always, what I always do, and the reason I do that is because I'm a teacher, just so you know. That's why my approach is always the same, because I approach it like a teacher would. Before I tell you who I think it is, I'm going to start off by telling you who it is not. Okay? One more time. Before I give you my take on who I think the most relatable superhero is, I have to start off by telling you who I think it is not. Okay? So we're going to start right there. Move that out the way. Let me pull up this right here. So a lot of people have said it's my personal favorite, Batman's. Now y'all know that Batman is my favorite superhero tied with Captain Marvel Shazam, not Captain Marvel Carol Danvers, not Marvel Captain Marvel, DC Captain Marvel, original Captain Marvel, who is originally a Fawcett character, Billy Batson, that says Shazam, that turns into Captain Marvel. So Batman and that Captain Marvel are my two favorite characters of all time. So a lot of people say that Batman is the most relatable hero because he dresses up in a costume and he beats up the bad guys and you know, and he does a lot of stuff that people wish they could do. So they say that Batman is the most relatable. I disagree vehemently. I disagree that Batman is the most relatable superhero because I don't think Batman is relatable at all. So let me hasten to say, I'm not one of those people that thinks I have to see myself in a hero to enjoy them. Because I know that's been kind of a thing for a while. People saying, representation and relatability, and you got to be able to see yourself in the heroes. And that narrative has been pushed for a good 5 to 7 years now, that you ought to be able to see yourself somehow. You ought to be able to see yourself in the heroes, and that the heroes don't really count, or they're not really having the impact, or you must have representation. And I've always thought that was kind of ludicrous. And the reason I thought that was ludicrous was because, oh Lord, y'all just had to bear with me today because I'm trying to deal with this camera stuff. The reason I've always thought that was ludicrous was because there are too many different kinds of people in the world. Like, for example, I wish I could find it. I think I have it somewhere on my channel. I haven't looked at it for a while. Anyway, I did an interview with this girl, a geek content creator. She was really, really cool. So we were having, geek conversations as we were interviewing. Then she said to me, she said, well, David, you're Black. I said, well, I'm Black and also Native American because I claim all my heritages. And she says, you still have plenty of heroes and things you can see. She said, I am a Japanese Navajo. She said, I'm part Japanese and I'm part Navajo Indian or indigenous people, or what we used to call Native Americans. She said, who can I relate to? She said, where's my hero? Where's my representation? And I was stunned. I was like, wow. And that's one of the things, that's why I always tell that story when I bring this topic up. That's one of the things I always tell people when they're trying to push a representation narrative, because there are too many different kinds of people in the world to try to put the restriction or the limitation or the parameter on superhero entertainment that you must be able to see yourself in the hero before you can enjoy them. That's ridiculous. That's not what superheroes are for. Superheroes are for escapism. Superheroes are for wish fulfillment. Superheroes are for fantasy and entertainment. I will never agree with the idea that you have to see yourself in them to enjoy them. Just don't. Just my take on it. So back to Batman. Why do I think Batman is not relatable, even though he's my favorite? The reason Batman is not relatable is because, first of all, Bruce Wayne is a one percenter. Bruce Wayne runs with the people that are in the top 1% of wealth owners in the country. So for you to run with his crowd, that's Elon Musk, that's Bill Gates, that's Mark Zuckerberg, that's all the people that are actually together. Whenever there's any type of reason for them to be in the same space, they're always the people in the same crowd. Jeff Bezos from Amazon. That's who Bruce Wayne's peer group is. So I'm not saying there's anything wrong with being a 1%. There's nothing wrong with having great wealth. I'm saying if you are not that, then how can you relate to Batman? It's because of that wealth that he was then able to train himself to become a crime fighter. And then originally, I just posted a tweet, originally The comic talks about how he trained himself, and then later on that's expanded to talk about his training around the world with various masters of different disciplines. Because Batman has studied escape arts, Batman has studied magic, was Zatanna's father. hmm Batman is a mixed martial arts master. Batman is really, really good with chemicals. Batman is a criminologist and he studied criminal psychology. So, Batman, remember, it's fantasy. Batman has mastered a lot of disciplines because Bruce Wayne is also a high intellect achiever. He's a super intellect and a super achiever because Batman's greatest superpower is that he doesn't give up. Batman kind of has this unbreakable will about him. Batman kind of has this indomitable. You can't break his will. You can't break his spirit, even if you break his body, because the bat inside of him that was born when Bruce Wayne's parents died in front of him is bigger than all that. But that's another conversation. So I'm saying, unless you're a one percenter, unless you are a 12th level intellect genius, unless you've had the money to train around the world and can afford all those tech and those gadgets that have to be custom made because they all have a bat motif. And unless you can afford the miniaturized tech that's in his utility belt. So Batman is cool. He's cool. He's probably of the big three that are the most famous in the world, Superman, Batman, Spider-Man. Batman is probably the coolest. But that don't mean he's relatable. Because Batman is not relatable. You'd have to have all that going for you. And you'd have to have your parents killed in front of you, and you'd have to be so devastated by that trauma that it made you swear a vow to fight crime, even if it kills you. So all of that is cool, and all of that is his mythology, but who can relate to that? Are you any of those things? Are you a one percenter? Are you a 12th level intellect genius? Have you trained around the world? Can you afford tech, stylized tech, to pull off your bat motif presentation? Can you do that? So no. So it's not Batman, as far as I'm concerned. Next up, let me show you who it is not. It is not Wonder Woman. Lord have mercy. I talked about this before. Wonder Woman is not the most relatable. She's probably the most famous superheroine, but Diana is not relatable at all. Now, I've talked about this before, both on a live stream and on Twitter, but the reason they have so many problems writing Wonder Woman is precisely because she's not relatable and they won't actually let her be her true self. This is why people need to read comics, and this is why people need to study stuff. You know, I study that kind of stuff. I've been reading comics since I was 4. And, you know, I study that kind of stuff, the background and everything. And the problem that many writers have with Diana is that they think she's supposed to be every woman. I want you to notice something. I want you to notice that whenever DC reboots its continuity, I want you to notice that Wonder Woman always changes the most. Whenever they reboot continuity, Batman pretty much stays the same. He might change maybe an element of his costume, but pretty much his mythology stays the same. The only thing they play with Batman is his age, because he got 6 Robins now. How old is Bruce? But Superman, you know, they put him in that T-shirt and the blue jeans. And, don't get me started on New 52 and Rebirth. But anyway, I want you to notice Wonder Woman, even with absolute Batman, absolute Superman, absolute Wonder Woman, I always want you to notice Wonder Woman changes the most. What does that tell you? That tells you that they don't like her mythology. They will never let her be who she really is. And they don't really know what to do with her because Diana is not relatable. First of all, Diana, her original origin is she's a homunculus. She's a golem. She's a clay statue brought to life. She wasn't born of a woman. She wasn't pushed out of her uterus. She was formed in the ground, and then her mother prayed to the gods to give her life, and then she came alive. They retconned that to make her be another bastard child of Zeus, but I don't like that origin because the first one's much more unique. Also, Diana is eternally beautiful. She'll always look just like that. So just like that picture I have on the screen, Wonder Woman will always look like that because she's immortal. Now, there are some things that she can do to take away her immortality, and there are some ways she can be hurt. But by and large, what's up, Kenius? Good to see you. By and large, if you hear a sound off in the comments so I can shout you out. But by and large, Diana's always going to look just like that. Okay? Diana is not every woman. Now, if you know anything about her creator, you know that he's the man that created the lie detector, which is why she has a lasso of truth. Okay, Cajun's here. What's up, Cajun? Good to see you. Okay. If you know anything about William Moulton Marston, you know that he was freaky and he lived in a three-way situation with his wife and his girlfriend. And so Diana is a bit of a composite of those women. You also know that Diana, right, didn't know that about Marcia. You also may not know that Diana is a bondage-based character because Marston had a bondage fetish. So Diana originally, if she ever got tied up by a man, she loses all of her power. They later on retconned that to say if she's tied up by her own lasso, but originally, if Diana is tied up by a man, she loses all of her powers. And then some people write Wonder Woman that her powers are innate. She actually won a contest among the Amazons, but her superpowers are endowed by her costume. Her bustier, her bracelets, her belt, her lasso, her boots are all endowments from the gods. That's what gives her extra level. So originally, she's not really super without them. She's the best of the Amazons. Okay. But yeah, Marston lived in three-way, and Marston was freaky. Same man that invented the lie detector. That's where the lasso of truth comes from. And he lived with two women. So most people don't know that about Wonder Woman because America would never accept Wonder Woman's true origin. So you have to go watch that movie that talks about where that comes from, and you will see all kinds of stuff you didn't know about Wonder Woman and her origins and where she actually comes from. So Diana is not really relatable. On what level? She comes from an island of women. She's been trained in both war and ambassadorship since she was a very little girl. She was created, and then she aged to a certain point and stopped aging, which is always funny because there are Amazons on the island that are older than her. So at what point do you stop aging if you're an Amazon? But anyway, you gotta let go of the nitpicky stuff to make superheroes work. And so, and then she fell in love with the first man she saw, Steve Trevor, and a lot of people, don't buy that relationship because most men will not seek to be in a relationship that makes them feel that way, which is why I said yesterday, and I said for a while, that's why I think Diana always ends up with Superman. Because I think both Diana and Superman eventually get tired of dealing with mortals who can't relate to their level of life. But Superman normally won't give a Diana until after Lois is dead, but Superman's going to outlive her. Now, Diana's going to outlive everybody, okay, but can't relate, okay? Now, next up, I'm going to play this video, and we're going to talk about the one that most people think is the most relatable. Before I tell you my choice, before I give you my take, we're going to talk about the one that most people think is relatable. Now, before I play that video, let me make this statement about Marvel and DC heroes. Now, this is originally, things have obviously evolved since the beginning, but remember that the DC superheroes started coming out in the late 30s, and the Marvel heroes started coming out in the 60s. DC heroes were always about the hero. DC heroes were always about the hero, and the secret identity was kind of an excuse. And we kind of tolerated the secret identity because we're waiting for them to spring into action. The story was about the hero. The only exception to that is Captain Marvel, Shazam. Those stories were actually about Billy Batson. And in Captain Marvel stories, Billy Batson would always go as far as he could go, and then he'd call on the captain. So that's one notable exception. But remember, he was originally also a Fawcett character. But DC heroes were always about the costumed identity, and the secret identity was kind of a placeholder until they could suit up. Marvel heroes are the other way around. Marvel heroes were about people that you know, people you went to school with, maybe you, that got powers and the lives didn't get any better because they had powers. And many Marvel heroes were born in tragedy. Some DC heroes were born in tragedy and some were born by accident, but not all. Most Marvel heroes, especially the early ones that Stan Lee created, were born out of tragedy. Fantastic Four, born out of accident. Body horror. Iron Man, accident. Metal shrapnel in his heart. Hulk, bomb accident. Jekyll and Hyde, Frankenstein monster. Thor losing his place in Asgard because of his arrogance, because Odin wanted to teach him a lesson. So most Marvel heroes are born from a struggle, with a struggle, in a struggle. Okay? So having said that, let me pull this video up. Okay? It's from my bud Scarif. I'm going to put his links down below. I follow him on Twitter, and we have good convos all the time. So let's hear what he has to say.
Hey, what is happening, DT and friends of DT2 Comics Chat? This is Ro, one half of the Scare Scuttlebutt podcast. And the question was posed about the most relatable comic book superhero. And I feel lucky because I think I know the answer. I think I know the answer before looking it up. I did a little research, and the interwebs is telling me that it's Spider-Man. And Spider-Man for me is my favorite comic book superhero, and for many reasons. And I think one of them really does rely on the relatability of Peter Parker and Spider-Man as a character. For those of you who have listened to the Scare podcast from time to time, when we talk about Spider-Man, when I talk about Spider-Man specifically, I tell the tale of how I wanted to be bitten by a radioactive spider, just like Peter Parker. I had a plan as a kid.
Now, we can all relate to that because we all did that. There's not a geek walking who wasn't walking around looking for a radioactive spider talking about, I hope I get bitten so I can get some of the spider powers. And there was just a news story this week about some kid who let himself get bitten. So that's not a new thing. We all did that. Let's keep going with the video.
Definitely had a plan. Didn't work, or did it? Anyways, I think, for me specifically, Peter Parker was a high school kid. He was struggling with school and life. He was a newspaper photographer. And these are all things that I too was going through. I was a newspaper photographer. I was a photo, lab geek in high school. So I think for me, Spider-Man and Peter Parker are the most relatable comic book superheroes. And, full disclosure, I am more of a Marvel Comics guy than I am a DC guy. So I wouldn't know how to tell you on the DC side who is the most relatable. But for me, especially on the Marvel comic side, I think Spider-Man. I'm gonna have to agree with the interweb. Doing a little research there, talking about Spider-Man as the most relatable comic book hero, I think makes sense. One of the things that we have to remember when we talk about these superheroes is it is the relatability of these characters. Whether you have been 4 years old reading comic books or 40 years old reading comic books, I think one of the things that latches on when you read about these characters is the relatability. So everybody's got a different answer, but I think that's what makes Marvel comics, especially Marvel, I would say, that's what makes these characters so relatable because they are not, for the most part, especially Peter and Spider-Man, they're not gods, they're not omnipotent, they're not supermen. They have flaws, and I think that's what makes for an interesting character. The
Now, let me pause that right there now. You've heard me say it a million times. DC characters have flaws. Yes, many times they're presented as gods, but they all have flaws. Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, Hal Jordan, Barry Allen, Aquaman, Martian Manhunter, they all have flaws, weaknesses. They all have that. It's just a lot of people don't know how to write them. A lot of people aren't aware that they have flaws. Like a lot of people have said that Diana is perfect. No, she's not. Diana has flaws. You want to know what one of Diana's biggest flaws is? One of Wonder Woman's biggest flaws is that she hates being displeasing to her mother. Diana and Hippolyta have a bit of a codependent relationship because Hippolyta didn't have any kids, and of course, there weren't any men around. And so she kind of built her whole life around Diana. And whenever Diana feels like she's not pleasing her mother, she kind of gets all out of whack. So that's just not true that DC characters in general don't have faults or flaws. That's not true. Both Superman and Martian Manhunter have survivor's guilt. Both Superman and Martian Manhunter have loneliness, except Superman has Kara until she goes to the Legion in the future. Martian Manhunter doesn't really have anybody except McGann in some continuities where she exists. But being the last surviving member of your race that's around, Aquaman, like Wonder Woman, like Superman, like Martian Manhunter, is a child of two worlds. Aquaman is rejected by both. The Atlanteans don't like Arthur because he looks like a surface dweller. He's blonde hair and blue-eyed. He's not blue skinned like they are. And the surface dwellers don't like Aquaman because he's a fish man. So Aquaman is a child of two worlds, but he's accepted in neither. So don't tell me that DC characters don't have flaws and challenges and weaknesses. Yes, they do. Yes, they do. Martian Manhunter sometimes is about to lose his mind from the loneliness. When you're a telepathic race and you're used to being in other people's heads and you're used kind of like the Borg, although that's forced, but when you're used to having other voices in your head and that's the only life that you know, what do you do when you're Jean, and your whole species is dead? So now you're just dealing with the loneliness. So don't tell me that DC characters don't have faults and flaws and challenges. Yes, they do. They're just not always written that way. But let's continue with the video.
These are things that happen to us as well. The struggle, the fight, the situations in life, and I think these are things that we can relate to. So for me, again, it's Spider-Man. For a lot of people, I think it's Spider-Man. The internet says it's Spider-Man. So hey, I'm gonna go with Spider-Man. It's just again, getting into the story of these characters that are larger than life, whether it's science fiction, fantasy, comic books. One of the things that makes for a memorable character, a character that kind of stands the test of time is the relatability of that character. Like I said, whether you started reading comic books at 4 or 40, I think it's one of those things that we latch onto, and we make a connection to these characters. So, Spider-Man for me, Spider-Man for many other people, and I hope that answers your question. It's kind of as simple as that. Your answer may vary, and that's okay. But would love to hear the rest of the show and see where everybody else stands on the relatability of characters of comic book heroes, and why that is. So those are some of my answers. And again, looking forward to hearing the rest of it. And thank you, DT, to Comics, and for inviting me on this edition. And all I can say is that's the Scuttlebutt. If you want to listen to more geeky Star Wars and sci-fi stuff, head on over to the Scare Scuttlebutt podcast, available wherever you download your other favorite podcasts. Talk to you guys later.
All right. So there we have his take, and what I think is a lot of people's take. I think a lot of people will say that Spider-Man is the most relatable. Okay. So I'm going to surprise everyone with yet more shock and awe, but I've got some unpopular opinions about that. I do not think that Spider-Man is the most relatable character. Okay, let me make my face big for that one. I do not think that Spider-Man is the most relatable character. I do not. So I know you're going to ask me why. I will tell you why I think that. First and foremost is because they keep saying that Peter Parker is the everyman, but no, he's not. No, he's not. Peter Parker is not every man. They might be trying to say that his experiences are more universal, but that's not true either. For example, a lot of people grow up in their house with both their bio parents. Some people are raised by a single parent, mom or dad. Now, the one thing I can vibe with is that Peter was raised by his aunt and uncle, because I was too. Okay, my aunt and my uncle raised me. I can understand that. But that experience is not universal. Okay. That experience, no, I don't want that. That experience is not universal. Okay, that's number one. Number two, Peter is a tech genius. He made his own webbing. Can you make a synthetic polymer with that type of tensile strength? Do you know how to do that? You say, well, he's just a nerd. No, Peter is a highly intelligent, highly capable nerd. Can you do that? How many people you know can do that? How many people do you know could create something as versatile and as powerful and as applicable as Spider-Man's webbing? Could you do that? Can you relate to that? How many people could do that? But you say no, DT, because, he goes through regular stuff. Well, he has a specific set of experiences that everybody doesn't have. So I know in your mind that may not qualify him or disqualify him for the most relatable, but it does to me, because people were talking about the stuff that Peter went through in high school. Okay, let me state for the record, everybody didn't go through the same things in high school. So they keep trying to push Peter as an everyman, meaning that his experiences were everybody's experiences. That's not true. If you were a nerd, if you were a geek, you can relate to that. That's Peter's experience. But if you weren't, your experience was different. If you were an athlete, your experience was different. And here's a big one. This one's going to surprise you when I say this. One of the things that people always talk about with Peter is how he was bullied in high school. And remember, we've had a narrative going now, and I'm not saying it's wrong. So don't mistake what I'm saying and don't put words in my mouth. I'm not saying we don't need to address bullying. That is not what I'm saying. I'm saying not everybody in high school was bullied. Some people were the bullies. Some people in high school were Flash Thompson. Did you know that? So the idea of addressing bullying is legit. The idea that everybody gets bullied is not. Some people did the bullying. Some people were Flash Thompson. That wasn't Peter's experience in high school. Okay. Some people, they're the very people that bullied others in high school. Okay. Then also in high school, some people were invisible. That never ceases to amaze me how people seem to miss that. So in high school, people, are normally classified by whatever group you run with. You might run with, the burnouts, people that just smoke and get so high, they just high all the time. They're just in a haze of weed. You might hang, with the criminals and the thugs. You might hang with the plastics. You might do a bunch of different things. You might hang with the brainiacs. You might hang with the jocks or whatever. I'm just using slang or whatever. But whatever your crowd was in high school. But everybody didn't have the same crowd. Everybody didn't have the same experiences. So that's why I don't agree that Peter's experience is universal. I agree that his experience can be very common, but everybody's not a nerd or a geek. Everybody doesn't have his level of intellect. Some people did the bullying in high school. Some people had their bio parents. And then also, I want to remind you that Peter's motivation for being a crime fighter is guilt. When Peter Parker first got his powers, what he wanted was wealth and fame, just like anybody else 15 years old would do. That part is relatable. Most people, if they were given spider powers, would try to find a way to capitalize on them. And Peter went after wealth and fame. Read his origin if you don't know that about Spider-Man. He went after wealth and fame. I was thinking about how many girls he was going to get. Also, before I finish that point, Peter Parker has always been a player. Peter Parker has always had the most beautiful women, from Betty Brant to Gwen Stacy to Mary Jane to Felicia Hardy and so many more. Peter has always been like this Mac. He's always been like this player. And I see your comments. Keep them coming. I'm going to talk about them. I'm going to go out of order. I'm going to pull your comments up before I reveal my choice. But anyway, so Peter has always had, like Mary Jane's a supermodel. People forget that because she's rarely presented in her original light. Mary Jane Watson was a supermodel party girl. Okay. So I'm not saying I don't understand why people are saying that. I'm just saying I don't see it the same way. Okay. So anyway, Peter was motivated by guilt. He went to get wealth and fame. When he got through with a wrestling match, a thief ran by him and they yelled for him to stop him. And Spider-Man just said it wasn't my problem. And the thief got away. So the wrestling ring owner and the cops were like, what's wrong with you? And Peter was like, it's not my problem. Okay. Turns out later on, that same thief that he let get away ended up killing his Uncle Ben. So Peter comes home and finds Uncle Ben is dead, sets out to find his killer, finds him, unmasks him, and finds that it's the same guy he let get away earlier. It's the same guy who ended up killing his Uncle Ben. And that's when Stan Lee wrote his immortal phrase of, with great power must also come great responsibility. Uncle Ben didn't say that. Stan Lee said that in the narration. Read his comic. Okay. So that is when Peter became a crime fighter, and that is why he became a crime fighter. And every time Peter tries to put down being Spider-Man, what brings him back is guilt. Guilt that he has the power to make a difference. He has the power to intervene. And when he doesn't, the guilt just eats him alive. Okay, that's Peter Parker. So it's not that I'm not saying I don't understand why people think he's the most relatable. I'm saying I personally don't see it that way because his experiences are not universal. So let me pull up some of these comments. Iraq says, I didn't know that about Marston. Yeah, you do some research. He's really a trip. Now, here's the one. I think with Spide and some of these characters, it's a generalization and a way to relate them that fits the closest to the reader's own experiences. And to that, I say, I can understand that. Maybe everybody in high school wasn't Peter. Everybody's not that type of person. And again, did you date the most beautiful women when you're in high school? Peter always had super hot women. Was that your experience? So I'm not saying I don't understand the argument. I'm saying I don't see it that way. So now it's time for me to reveal to you my choice, who I think the most relatable superhero is. And I guarantee this is going to surprise you, but I will explain my position. Here it comes. I think the most relatable superhero is, drum roll please, Steve Rogers, Captain America. What? That's right. I think Steve Rogers, Captain America. Notice I'm saying Steve Rogers, Captain America, because I don't mean Bucky, Captain America, and I don't mean Captain Carter, and I don't mean Sam Wilson. I mean Steve Rogers, Captain America. I think Captain America is the most relatable superhero. Why? Several reasons. First reason why is because there are more people like Steve than there are like Peter. There are people willing to fight and die for the country, and they do it every day. Willing to fight and die for their country, and they do it every day. Remember, what makes Captain America as a concept a superhero is the super soldier formula combined with the vita rays that enhance his abilities. Now, in the comics, that turned him into a peak human. So in other words, he was Olympic athlete level, as strong as a person could be, as fast as a person could be. That's Cap in the comics. In the movies, he's got super strength. Captain America in the movies is strong enough to stop a helicopter from taking off with his bare hands. Captain America in the comics is stronger and faster than 12 men in an elevator. So he's got superhuman abilities in the movies, and I prefer that version. But there are people that already do what Steve Rogers does, and they do it without superpowers. And we live in an age where everything is politicized. There are more people that are willing to fight for their beliefs and die for them than I think there are people like Peter. Because Captain America does what we do, and we do what he does. Cap just does it at a higher level. Now, that's true about some other heroes like Flash. We run, we just don't run faster in light. But I'm saying pound for pound, for me, it's Steve Rogers. Because he gave his life for what he believed in. That is what America is about. Now, understand clearly what I'm saying. I am not saying that we all believe the same thing in America, because that is obviously not true. That's a good question. Would USA agent qualify too? Maybe, but he doesn't have the same character, and he doesn't quite have the same motivation. A lot of the people that follow in Cap's footsteps are trying to be like him. Union Jack, yeah. Captain Britain, yeah. Union Jack, Captain Britain, same idea. So yes. But I mean specifically, America is about the idea and the ideals and the freedom to express those ideas and live by what you believe. That's kind of the foundation of our country, more so than many other countries, because many other countries have an established religion, and we claim that we don't, but that's another conversation. But here, our country is about the freedom to set those own ideas and ideals and live by them and fight and die for them if you have to. And we see that every day. So I think that, okay, people can still relate to US agent. They're out there too. I agree. But the question was most relatable. The question was most relatable. Most relatable. And I think, just my opinion, I think more people are like Captain America than USA agent because we believe what Steve believes. Steve believes you should have the freedom to make your choices, not that others should be making those choices for you and not trying to tell you what those choices are per se. Of course, we draw different political lines. Of course, we do. But that's the beauty of America. Now, I'm not a political person. Y'all have heard me say that before. I am not political because I don't believe in the limitations of the two-party system. I believe in the truth. What's the truth? Truth is what makes free. Truth is, see, if something is not built on truth, it can start, but it's not going to stand. And truth is older than America, and truth does not have a political affiliation. Truth just is what it is. Let me make my face big for that one. Truth just is what it is. So I'm a truthist. I'm not a political person. And I don't believe that everything in life can be categorized as centrist, right-leaning, or left-leaning. I don't believe that either. Because life is bigger than that. Life is much bigger than that. So life has more categories. Life has more dimensions. Life has more subtleties. Life has more shades, nuances. Life has more dimensions than left or right or center. So I don't agree with that frame. Truth is bigger than all of that. Truth is bigger than all peoples anywhere. So that's just my personal view. Okay, let me pull up this comment. Most relatable disqualifies Nightwing, Billy Batson, Freddie Freeman, and Hawkeye. There's a lot of folks that did not grow up in those circumstances. That's right. Dick Grayson grew up in a circus. That's a very particular kind of upbringing. Dick Grayson was an acrobat from the time he was a little boy. Okay. Billy Batson, most people don't know that Billy Batson actually had an inheritance that his evil uncle stole. So Billy ended up being put on the street, but Billy was supposed to be poor or have hard knocks. Billy had money. Okay. Clint in the circus, Freddie Freeman, disability, and all different kinds of stuff. So I agree. So, like I said, the question is most relatable, not are they relatable at all? Because I agree that there are elements in all of these heroes that gives a certain amount of relatability, some more so than others. The question was most relatable. And my answer is Steve Rogers, Captain America, not Bucky, not Sam, not Sharon Carter, not, Peggy Carter, or Sharon either. It's Steve Rogers. Because there are already more people that do this than anybody else. There are already more of this type of person. People that would march, people that would stand in lines, people that stand outside in the freezing cold, people that put their lives in danger for what they believe. I'm not talking about what those beliefs are. I'm talking about their willingness to sacrifice themselves for what they believe and for what those beliefs represent for others. There are more people in America like that than there are like Peter Parker, as far as I can see. So this is my choice for most relatable. is Captain America. So those of you that are watching me live, if you got any more comments, put them up there. I'll put them on the screen. Those of you that are watching this video on the replay, put your comments down below because I definitely want to hear what you have to say. Like I said, as odd as those characters I mentioned are great characters that a lot of people would get along with easily, you'd have to get past Hawkeye sarcasm. True. But also, let's point out that Hawkeye, they gave Hawkeye's personality to Tony Stark in the MCU. The banter that Tony has with Cap in the comics was Hawkeye and Cap. They always had a friendly rivalry that sometimes got a little out of hand. They were always like two brothers that loved each other but hated each other. They gave that to Tony and Steve in the MCU, but in the comics, that is Clint and Steve, not Tony Stark. Okay, so in the MCU, Hawkeye doesn't really have a personality. I want you to describe Clint Barton to me in the MCU. He does not have a personality. The most interesting thing about Clint Barton in the MCU is his assassin past, especially with Black Widow, with Natasha, and the fact that he had a secret family that nobody knew about until Age of Ultron. Those are the two most interesting things about Clint Barton. Other than that, you can't describe his personality. In the comics, he's very much a product of growing up in the circus. He's very much sarcastic, quick-witted. He's very much giving Cap, the business all the time. In the movies, Hawkeye has no personality. Okay? But anyway, I agree that Nightwing, Billy Bassett, and Freddy are all great people that we love to hang around. I'd add Wally West to that. Wally West would be a lot of fun to hang around. I'd also add Beast Boy, Gar Logan, I think would be fun to hang around with. Thoughts on Alan, Scott, or Hal, or John? Funny you should mention that. But anyway, I'll be brief here because I think I'm going to have to do a separate video on that. But I think each of the Lanterns have their own distinct personality. I think that out of all of them, the one that probably has, I guess, the most traits people could relate to would maybe be John, maybe, because of his military background and because of his no-nonsense attitude. So maybe that. But Green Lanterns, remember, are chosen specifically because they're able to overcome great fear. And Green Lanterns are chosen specifically because they have extraordinary willpower. So they don't have a regular willpower like regular people. They have extraordinary willpower above and beyond. That's how you get picked to be a Green Lantern. So I don't know if we can say that that is the most relatable quality in people. Maybe you can make an argument for it. I don't know. But like I said, my argument is still that most of us would fight for what we believe because we do. Don't we see lines? And remember, in America, we have the right to peaceful protest. Now, of course, that's not always played out the same way, but let me pull this one up. John is like Denzel and Equalizer to me. Hall is Han Solo. Alan is Alan every man? Maybe. Remember that Alan Scott has been retooled several times, so he's not the same character he started out being. So maybe. John is like Denzel and Equalizer, right? He's got, or like Liam Neeson in Taken, he's got that particular set of skills, so don't mess with him because he will find you. Hal is Han Solo. Yes, Hal Jordan is also Maverick. How they didn't never tap Tom Cruise to play a Green Lantern is beyond me, especially for the show since they want an older Hal and he's retiring. Tom Cruise is Hal Jordan. Tom Cruise is Maverick. Tom Cruise has great willpower. Tom Cruise ain't afraid of much. That man ran down the Burj Khalifa. I'll never forget that. So, how they missed Tom on the Green Lantern tip, I don't understand. Just like now they're talking about Alexandra Daddario being Wonder Woman. Alexandra Daddario is Zatanna incarnate. She can play Diana, but Alexandra is Zatanna. I know you say Zatanna, but I say Zatanna. Alexandra Zatanna, man. I've been saying that on Twitter for years. She can play Diana, but it looks like if Zatanna walked right out the comic as Alexandra Daddario to me. But anyway, so that's about it. I really enjoyed this convo. We've been talking about this. I'm going to do a separate video on the lanterns. That's probably going to be a rant room video. So that's not going to be a weekly comic chat because I need to rant about some things when it comes to the lanterns. But anyway, so thanks to everybody that joined me live. If you're watching this video on replay, definitely leave some comments, like, subscribe to my channel, and share this video because that helps me out. You know, the algorithm is always changing. So the one thing we have in common is that when you have a lot of comments on your videos, when your videos get a lot of likes and shares, that helps the channel. So I appreciate that. Okay, so that's it for me today. Everybody have a good one. I'll talk to you soon. I'll see you next week on the next weekly live Comics Chat. DT2 Comics Chat. Out.